Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for your patience while you were waiting in the waiting room. We're so excited to have Anthony as well as Mark being presenters today. Mark is still connecting to audio, so once he's connected on video, we're going to pull him up to the screen. So first, welcome to day 2, or almost the end of day 2 of DC Startup Week. For everyone here, you've probably seen me in a couple ones. My name is Rachel Kretzky. I am one of the organizers for DC Startup Week, as well as the founder of my own tech startup, Kpis. We're in the midst of the 5-day conference, really focused on supporting entrepreneurs and founders throughout. A huge part of what we do at DC Startup Week is ensuring that the week is completely free for all attendees, as we want to ensure entrepreneurship is accessible to all. And we really couldn't do that without the support of our sponsors. So I want to say a special thank you to our title sponsors, where we have 2 of them on the call today. Next, powered by Shulman, Rodgers, Insperity, Wiz, as well as Technology Rivers. We have Anthony from Next here with us, as well as Mark from Wiz. So I'm so grateful and so thankful to have both of you with us today. So please join me in welcoming Anthony and Mark to the DC Startup Week stage.
Great, thank you, Rachel. It's great to be here, and we're looking forward to today's panel on Series A and beyond. On the panel with me today, we have Mark Brenner from Wiz & Company. We have Greg Merrill from Adaptive Phage Therapeutics, Elizabeth Cho-Fertikh from MEDA Angels, and Deepak Chhugani from Nuvocargo. What I thought we'd do before we jump into the content of today's session is just ask each of our guests to just give a brief introduction, just to introduce yourself and your different companies, and then we can get started. And so let's start with Mark.
Okay, you got me? You hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Mark.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Brenner. I'm co-founder of a early stage group within a large accounting firm called Wiz & Company. The early stage group is called West. We have built a process and a technology to help entrepreneurs not only with their accounting and finance, but with getting themselves investor ready for Series A. And so we've helped hundreds of companies go through this process from an accounting and finance perspective. And just to finish, I call myself Chief Return on Sacrifice Officer. Our mission is to help entrepreneurs get that outcome they deserve for the sacrifices they make.
Great, thank you, Mark. And now we'll go over to Greg.
Hi, I'm Greg Merrill. I'm the CEO of Adaptive Phage Therapeutics. I'm a serial life science entrepreneur. I have cumulatively closed deals in excess of $100 million. And my current company is a company that's based on research that my father did in his career at the National Institutes of Health, where he developed a way of using viruses called bacteriophage, or phage for short, to treat bacterial infections that are otherwise not responding to antibiotics. And we're currently supported by the US Department of Defense, and we are in a sort of a Series A/Series B financing right now. So we look forward to sharing my experiences.
Great, thank you, Greg. Elizabeth?
You're on mute, Elizabeth.
You're on mute, sorry.
Sorry, I should know this by now. Thank you very much for having me, Anthony, and DC Startup Week. My name's Elizabeth Cho-Fertikh, and I am one of the co-founders and the managing director of a healthcare angel investor group called MEDA, M-E-D-A Angels. Since I'm here, I guess we're based here, but my co-founders, who are physician investors, I'm a PhD scientist, they are in Baltimore, Philadelphia, and San Francisco. So we do look at deal flow from all over the country. But of course, it's always nice to see a local hero too sometimes. We invest at the mid-seed and Series A stages, and across all healthcare. We're pretty liberal, even preventive health like sports tech, food tech. I personally come from a cancer therapeutics background, so I know what it's like in industry and trying to get drugs through to the FDA. So from preclinical, manufacturing, clinical trial.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. Deepak?
Thank you very much for having me, and thanks again to Mark for the invite. So my name is Deepak Chhugani. I'm the founder and CEO of Nuvocargo, and Nuvocargo is essentially a logistics tech startup modernizing the way we move cargo, physical goods between across the Americas, starting with U.S.-Mexico trucking. We've raised $5.5 million, which we announced in April, which you could call kind of a Series A, and on a path to, I believe, raising more capital. I also have a story where started with one idea, pivoted, dealt with some investor drama there that I believe Mark wanted me to share today. Happy to share that if that helps other entrepreneurs. And then I've also raised capital for, I think now it's over $25 million worth of kind of real estate deals in Florida. And, we have investors from Silicon Valley and Mexico and Latin America. And, happy to share anything that can be helpful there. And I guess in a previous life, I was also an investment banker at Merrill. And so, happy to share any insights, and any founders out there know how hard it can be. And so if I can be helpful in any way, here to help you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And just to briefly introduce myself, I am Anthony Mellen. My background is being a serial entrepreneur and partner in a VC fund, as well as a startup attorney. And I chair Next, which is powered by Shulman Rodgers, a local DC area law firm, which is an innovative new model for delivering legal services for the full life cycle of startup and emerging growth companies, where we offer predictable legal fees through over 75 fixed price packages and service bundles that are designed for startups and are delivered in a hands-on approach by senior attorneys. And we integrate technology from leading platforms like NASDAQ and Carta and UShare and other best of breed tools to create a very collaborative, transparent, and efficient client-centric experience. So to set the stage for today, we have, we imagine we have a company that has completed its pre-seed financing. It did a SAFE for a convertible note. The company then went on and completed seed financing, again, as a SAFE or convertible note, or maybe even a priced seed or Series AA round, and did either one or multiple seed rounds. And the company has been very busy executing against its business plan and is now assessing and planning for a Series A round. And that is really the focus of today's session. So the first question to the panel is, as this company, as the founders and entrepreneurs of this company, looking at it from both an advisor, CEOs of these types of companies and investor in these types of companies, what are the types of milestones should a company like this have hit to be ready to go out for a round of Series A financing? And if you can kind of give descriptions across core milestones, including the product and technology, traction, revenue, and team, if you can kind of give a sense of where you guys have been yourselves as entrepreneurs when you've gone out, and where you would recommend companies be across those areas. And maybe for this one, we'll start with the entrepreneur's perspective and hear from Greg and Deepak, and then switch over to Elizabeth and Mark for their perspectives.
Okay, well, that's certainly a situation I've faced in my career multiple times. I think that the investors, as you're getting into the more professional institutional investors, are really looking for a lot of risk to be taken off the table before they come in. And I usually put the risk into three major buckets. Those would be the technical risk. They want to see actual demonstratable product as opposed to a concept or just rough prototype. So showing that, yeah, the thing actually works, that you're pursuing. And then they want to see the market risk significantly reduced. So reducing market risk means that you actually have people paying money for the service or product, that showing that there's an unmet need, and you're actually, your product meets that unmet need. And then the third bucket is the operational risk. So you you need to have some demonstration that you are able to actually execute on a plan. Often they're looking for people that you've been able to recruit on your team that have been there and done that before, so that they're not risking the learning curve risk for the investment. And I think that what often these investors are looking for is it's acceptable to have some weakness in one of those areas. But I think it's very challenging to get an investor at the professional Series A level to come in if there's weakness in two of those three areas.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Do you have things you can add to that or would like to add to that, Deepak?
Yeah, definitely. I would just say that something I've learned, we were incubated at Y Combinator in Silicon Valley, and that let us meet a bunch of companies in different stages. And I've seen many of them raise, 5, 10 million rounds, and then in some cases much more. And one thing that I've learned, I don't know if Greg would agree, is that it really can depend on the market and the business model, what you need to raise kind of a professional Series A round. I think across the board, investors sometimes are sector agnostic or thesis driven. It really depends on the fund. It also depends on the size of their fund, what strategy they'll have. But typically, if you're raising that kind of $5 to $10 million or more Series A, what we've learned is that you really have to look at comparables across your business model. Like, it's very different for an enterprise SaaS company with really high margins to raise a Series A, and the metrics that they're accustomed to seeing for that type of round versus a B2B marketplace or a consumer app. Like, all of these, there's different metrics and comps that they'll try to look at to understand, has this company significantly mitigated core risks to Greg's point. And then I think that, with these professional bigger Series A rounds, even if there is some weakness, to Greg's point, I think that the investors need conviction that it can be a very outsized outcome, and that the team, they're more excited than they are scared about the risks, because their job is to invest in risk. But they see that the opportunity and what you've done so far gives them this confidence that you're going to grow quickly and you're going to achieve milestones. But it's so dependent on different businesses, because if you're, a hardware company or a life sciences company, as I know a few of those, I don't know in Greg's case, but, I feel like you can raise a lot of, if you have the faith from the investors, you can raise a lot of capital before certain millions of dollars of revenue. But if you're a company that can get started faster, investors really want to see that you've done a lot to mitigate, because your business requires less capital to get started, right? So those are, some additional comments.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
just to amplify. I just want to amplify on what Deepak was saying. I mean, these different market sectors are very different with regard to what they're looking for in terms of that risk profile. So in the biotech space, there's no expectation that you're going to have revenues or market traction from a product that has to go through a series of clinical trials. At the Series A level, really they're just looking for potentially an IND allowance by the FDA as a milestone. And if you have the clinical trial data, you've already passed the Series A stage, and now you're looking at Series B. And sometimes companies that have data coming out of a phase 2 trial, those are the companies that are going for IPOs. So it's very different from some of these other technology sectors.
Elizabeth, I'd like to bring you into the conversation now, just in terms of some of when you're looking as an investor for companies that are now going into their Series A, in some of the different sectors that you invest in, kind of how you would advise somebody who's thinking about a Series A today in terms of whether they should be going back and doing another seed round or pushing forward into a Series A because they're ready.
Yeah, so I think what Deepak and Greg mentioned are very solid, and you obviously have experience, because I'm going to echo some of what you say. It's very sector dependent from the health. We have both digital health, which is, it's more SaaS-like, marketplace-like. Those metrics are going to be different. For Series A, I don't want to put too much artificiality around it, but if I had to say you should be nearing the $1 million mark, what does that entail? What have you had to show for that? Probably means definitely you're well past an MVP, right? You should be. You've got market penetration, and it hopefully isn't just one customer. It should be multiple customers across maybe a couple segments to show there's a product market fit there, market speaking. That's good. You're ready for an A round. If not, maybe as Anthony alluded to, go back for a seed series 2. For biotech, medical device, very milestone driven. And again, A, B, all those are a bit artificial, but A tells me you're well past proof of concept, animal studies, maybe even having done some preliminary talks, and you're well on to manufacturing, and you have a clear path to FDA approval. These are milestone-driven sectors, device and pharma.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. Mark, you look at it from a different perspective. You're advising clients who are kind of coming to you as you're looking, and you see kind of across multiple sectors as well. Maybe you can touch on a few of the sectors that we haven't hit on in terms of biotech and some of the healthcare, just in terms of things that you're seeing to help some of our listeners today in some other sectors think about what they may want to kind of have ticked off before they try to push forward with this.
Well, one ratio that I like that applies to, pretty much all the direct-to-consumer companies, as well as a lot of the B2B SaaS and other product companies, is the ratio of the lifetime value of your product or service to the cost per acquisition. I mean, like on the direct-to-consumer side, that's really all you need to do. Like if you can tell a Series A investor that if you give me $1 million, I can turn it into 5 million, then you're ready for Series A. And so a lot of times, the entrepreneurs, they have to think about these outputs to present to investors. I do agree with the $1 million threshold that was mentioned by Elizabeth. That's kind of a magic number. And then the other thing I'd say is, they want to see a 10x. I mean, that is true, that most cases the 10x return on the investment is something that they want to be able to see it so that it can blend the portfolio in case certain companies don't achieve. And so you've got to also think about your price point on your round and say, okay, if I have a $15 million price point to the pre-money, then I have to deliver a $150 million company, and make sure that you have the data associated with that to support that it can be that.
Great. So once you've identified, just taking some of that guidance that you've all laid out in place, kind of making sure you have enough fuel in the tank to get you through the time period to complete a Series A, because the last thing you want to do is kind of be entering into the Series A negotiations having run out of cash or about to run out of cash. From your experiences, again, how long would you tell people, how much of a reserve and run rate would you tell people they should have in place in order to kind of know that they're giving themselves the best shot from a time perspective to complete a Series A round? Maybe Mark, we'll start with you and kind of work our way. Everyone else can kind of jump in after that.
I usually tell folks 6 months is kind of what you should allot for the process. If you can't get it done in 6 months, you're in trouble. And then I'll usually tack on at least another 3 months of runway, just so that, again, if it sort of stretches out to 6 months, then you still have 3 months of fuel left and you're not on fumes. That's usually how we advise folks.
Great. Elizabeth, what have you seen if you're kind of advising some and making sure when you do your seed investments, your clients are going to have enough runway to hit milestones and get into an A round?
Yeah, I think the process for biotech is somewhat longer. You gotta go there. I don't know about during COVID, but I say more 9 months. It's pretty grim, but that's the reality. Digital, maybe 6 months, yeah. So, plus minus the 3-4 extra months runway. Just have a cushion.
Good. And Greg or Deepak, if you guys want to jump in from kind of how you plan these when you've both been through this.
Sure. I don't know.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Greg.
I totally agree with Mark and Elizabeth in terms of how long it takes. I think the key for everyone who's an entrepreneur who's looking at doing these Series A's is to really think strategically about leverage. As you're running out of cash, your leverage is really going down, and you can put yourself in it. And it's to the venture capitalist or the investor advantage to let you run out of cash. So it's important to run a competitive process and have that built in and try to do whatever you can to generate that FOMO, that fear of missing out. And that's going to help get the deal done faster, but plan on that 6 to 9 months, but not then. And if you think your runway is 6 months, that's not enough, because you don't want to be running out of cash the day that you close on the next round, because that'll be leveraged against you.
Definitely. I mean, those are the same words I was going to use in terms of like leverage and FOMO. For me, the founders always trying to find as much leverage as they can. Some people criticize YC in Silicon Valley for creating this like founders versus investors mindset, because investors, once they're on, like the ones that are now on our board, they're on our team and they want to help us, get less dilution and raise big rounds and be successful. But when you are fundraising, you need to do everything to put yourself in a position of high leverage. And for me, high leverage is, you want to signal that there's an inflection point in the business, so you're growing. So how many months and how much money do you actually need to show that you've made progress against the milestones that in your sector are typical? It's really hard to come up with typical stories because VCs are investing in outliers, and if they like you, they'll make up an excuse to invest early or invest later or whatever, right? But if you are if you are on a path where, let's say, if you believe the $1 million annualized revenue, I've heard that number. I've also heard many Series A's getting done with much less revenue than that and much more. But let's say that's the number, then can you get there while you still have 6 to 9 months of runway? And then you start your process, and then you're talking to the investors and generating a lot of demand from different players. We've had, angel rounds that took, one angel round that took, a few months to close. I was on a rolling basis, and the last round, 4 term sheets in 3 weeks. And it was really a function of, investors liked our sector. They understood the model. They had gotten whispers from other entrepreneurs about us. And even though we had less than 6 months of runway, we could get the round done quickly, right? And so I think more runway is better, but everything is about creating leverage, having options, and then signaling the inflection point. And actually, a thing that I don't think enough entrepreneurs talk about is the running a process really well run, and then having people that are helping you, talking to the investors, so that you're not with one investor who's about to give you a term sheet and then 2 months later you start a process with another. It should all kind of be in parallel, so that when you get one term sheet, the other 10 investors are, I was in my 3rd round of diligence or whatever, and I can actually make an offer, versus you move too fast, no good for me, and then they all bow out, right? So you kind of have to be good at managing the process and in parallel to create that competitive bidding process, not only for the price, but also terms, right? Terms are, in my opinion, more important than price a lot of the time, right?
Absolutely.
Anthony, can I add one more point? In terms of leverage, something much more stable than, I got an inflection point, I got this and that. For us, a number of sectors try to get grant money. That means you're non-diluted. And we always like that as investors. And it's also a mark of validation. And that's inflection, I would say, independent. It's there. It's on the cap, not on the cap table, rather. So that helps.
Great, thank you. In terms of we've started off and kind of talked about what you need to have in place and the kind of runway. So imagine you feel good about the milestones, you feel good about the runway. How would you advise founders to start preparing for a Series A financing from a process point of view? What would be the types of things that that founders should be doing to, like, how do you even kick off the process? And then how do you prepare for what's going to come your way so that you're ready for it when it starts? And maybe this, we can start off maybe with Greg, and we'll get Greg and Deepak. We'll start off on the entrepreneur side and then go to Mark and Elizabeth this time.
Well, I think to prepare, this is where, you do have to have a good legal team to start working on the due diligence materials that the professional investors want to see, because they're going to be looking at more than just the science or the product. They want to see that you have your house in order, and they're always going to be looking for your cap table, and so some of the things you want to start working on is putting together a data room where you have your all your corporate documents and your cap table and your scientific papers backing up your saying, just this data room, yeah, I mean that's certainly a big part of what you need to start working on. And typically you'll engage with a Series A investor with non-confidential materials, and often you'll probably want to get your investors to sign non-disclosure agreements, but often the venture capitalists don't want to until they're really much more serious. And so you have to have these two tiers of materials to share with investors: your non-confidential materials, and then your confidential materials. So you can start building these two different data rooms and two different PowerPoint decks, that one that's non-confidential that you feel it's fine to let it get out there, and then another one after investors get more serious and sign a non-disclosure agreement where you can start doing a deeper dive with confidential materials.
Just in terms of the investor deck that you mentioned and the investor material, Mark, when you're working with companies to kind of get them ready, that investor package that you want them to have in place, what kind of makes up that package, and what guidance would you give to our audience today who might be starting to work on putting an investor package together for kind of a VC level round?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things I think to sort of get in your head at first before you're pulling the whole package together. One is, what have you de-risked or proven? Make sure you've got that clear. And then what are you going to accomplish with the money? And you'll have a clear understanding of what are the 3 or 4 most important things that need to be accomplished to get to the next level. And then from there, your forecast should make sure that they all are in line with, sort of what you're going to accomplish with the money. Same with your deck. And then, if you have a teaser, to have that, but the whole package kind of makes sense together against accomplishing something rather than using use of funds. And then on the deck side and the story side, we usually tell folks, let's have the top 3 things that you want the investor to take away from the meeting. What are the 3 reasons why they should invest in you? And kind of like media training, be constantly reinforcing those 3 things as you go through the deck and you go through all of your financial materials.
Elizabeth, what do you look for as an investor? And you see probably hundreds of investor packages. Kind of what catches your eye, and what would you advise people who are now kind of starting the process of getting ready, who try to reach out to you?
Sure. Without repeating what Greg and Mark have said, which are all true, I love people who've done their homework and put together a nice looking package and not an executive summary. When we say a 1-pager, we do mean a 1-pager and not like a 10-page, document that we have to read. Do your homework, make it easy for us. Absolutely be available when we call you and have questions. Don't, send and then disappear for a week, please. The other thing, be ready, because if we want to get references from your customers, I know they're very sensitive, but we need to have references. So be open and be prepared to have to, share that kind of information. Of course, we'll be sensitive and not intrusive, but be prepared for interviews from us.
And Anthony, can I just add one more thing?
Sure.
The companies that I see that are the most successful in fundraising at the Series A level have a level of discipline in the approach of who they go after and why. And so doing the homework in terms of which venture firms make sense and why is really important, rather than being in the opportunistic mode of who you know and sort of floating all over the place. And then at least the investors I've talked to in the past, I like to say, take like your top 20 or top 10 and go to 5 or 10 of them before you're selling and let them get to know you and then start tracking you. Tell them what you're going to do, and then hopefully you do it. And then take the other 5 or 10 and hold off on them for a little while until, in case you don't hit your milestones.
Thanks. Deepak, do you have anything you'd like to add in?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like covered a lot. I guess the only things I would add is that for me, raising a round first is kind of the process of how you get the introductions and how you pre-qualify the investor. So I have an Excel, who's going to introduce me to which fund, have they invested in companies in our sector? I find that there's a lot of money out there, and sometimes it's kind of shocking even to me when I sit and do the list. There's so many funds that have raised venture capital funds in the past few years that it's good to try and filter out people that have actually invested in your type of business model or your sector, or maybe your geography. We have some exposure to Latin America. So I'll pre-qualify those. I'll actually try to see who's going to make the introductions. And for me, the order of introductions is, do they invest with the person who would introduce me? So a co-investor. Is it a founder that they funded in the past? That's also something that I value a lot. I can also immediately reference the investor and hear if the investor is good, like what's it like to have them on your board. And then, anyone else, as long as the person introducing you is going to endorse you a lot, because if you're a venture capitalist, you're getting, they like to brag that they're getting 1,000 pitches or 2,000 pitches a year. And so there's a lot of noise in their inbox. And so it's either someone they really respect or someone who's going to vouch for you in an incredibly intense way. I think the person who made 30 intros for us in the last round said something like, I've ranked all my CEOs and Deepak is the best, and something that like stood out to the investors. And almost all of them said, I'll at least take the meeting, because your goal at that point is to get the meeting. From a material standpoint, I'll also have some kind of like a simple blurb with maybe a link to a simple deck that I don't mind being shared around, to Greg's point, because there is a lot of information sharing amongst investors. And that's something that, we just have to live with. It's a reality. And then, going through the process of meeting them, always try to have customer references ready, financials, legal due diligence. We've been living in a world where we went through YC and we raised from Silicon Valley investors. So there's all these plain vanilla documents that they're used to. So the diligence piece, that actually makes it simpler, because everyone knows that you have a Delaware C Corp and, you are using the same law firm. So we've had many VCs where we're negotiating term sheets and, oh, you use the same law firm as me, so we have to get an exception. And so everyone just knows the same things to use, and that seems to simplify diligence quite a bit. And then just proof of product market fit and that you're not a fraud, right? So, screenshots of your bank account where the revenue is hitting, things like that were, to me, they made a lot of sense. But until someone said, can you send me screenshots of like this invoice with, that money actually hitting the bank, which makes a lot of sense, right? They want to make sure, because there can be a lot of lying that happens in those processes. So just making sure that you have all that stuff ready, I think leads to a pretty decent process.
So just playing on some, when you just spoke about 2 things that I just want to tease out a little bit more. One is you dealing with investors who are seeing sometimes 1,000 or more plans. And a lot of times entrepreneurs will ask, is it even worth just reaching out themselves, or should they really be kind of spending their time trying to find the right warm introductions to investors, and understanding that the goal of the introduction is to just break through and get that first call. Like, you're not trying to sell somebody on a deal, you're trying to get the first meeting or the first call.
Exactly.
Elizabeth, from an investor's perspective, would you tell people to kind of not, there's too much noise out there to just be sending things to people you don't know, or would you tell people they should do that if it's targeted enough? Like, what we hear a lot of times, entrepreneurs kind of not sure about how to break through and get that first meeting or that first call.
Sure, I'm sure it's frustrating. A warm intro always helps, right? Even for jobs, trying to get a job. So if you know an angel who happens to know a VC or another super angel, ask for an intro. And it's hard to say no to your friends, right? So warm intros tops. Second, I see all the deals that come in. I don't have time for everything, but I quickly scan at least. So I still go through every single one. I am overwhelmed and my brain can't digest everything, but I still take a look. So I don't think it's a waste. Still send them out, but try for warm intros. Go all out is what I say. Go all out.
Anyone else have anything else on just that area, Mark? Kind of your experience, how you guys help with some warm intros?
Yeah, we have folks that are sort of on our extended team that will make intros, warm intros to large groups of investors in a very cost-effective fashion without a success fee associated with that. So, a group like Startup Boost in New York has 400 investors, and for like a very small amount of money, they'll get you like 15, 20 meetings. So there's some folks out there that, again, if you need to supplement your own network, that can help. But not folks, that are, the success fee based folks that, are, more like investment bankers is not appropriate typically for a Series A financing.
Also, if I can add one thing, Anthony, I was just going to say that, I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I wasn't at a tech company before. And then just, getting into YC and then meeting all these other founders, that's kind of how I started building a network. And if there's other founders out there who are, I've heard it a lot, I can't get warm intros. It's really hard. You want a cold email. I would say one kind of underrated shortcut is to find founders that you admire. And instead of, telling them, hey, can you be my mentor? Can you help me? Or can you do me a favor and introduce me? If you can find random ways to help those founders without expecting anything in return, that's how I found a way to build goodwill with people that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars. And then when I tell them I'm fundraising, they're like, I want to invest and I want to introduce you to 5 people whose fund I invested in. And it just creates this domino effect because founders like helping other founders, but they're all busy and they don't want to, everyone wants something from the founder. And so if you're also another person that just asks for something instead of helping them or befriending them, I don't know. I find that in a lot of the panels and things that I've seen, no one preaches like how to create these relationships so that the introductions are really high quality introductions. And the way I've gotten them is just every founder I meet, if I see they're kind of, admirable, I'll just find a way to help them. Whether it's, oh, you're hiring for this, here's someone I know, I'll help you with this. I saw a typo on your website, whatever, to show that you're not just out for yourself, you're trying to help. And that comes back tenfold, at least in my case. And I think for many founders I know, right?
One thing that I would add is that I think that it can be a criteria for how you pick your law firm too. Not to just pick the cheapest law firm that's going to file your incorporation documents or whatever, but look for a law firm that can be that can make some warm introductions and has enough transaction experience to have those relationships and have that be part of the criteria, so that you might even pay more for a law firm that can provide that kind of guidance than one that doesn't have those relationships.
There are multiple types of events in DC. Maybe you've heard of Connectpreneur or any of these. Go and network. You can't sit still. I know COVID makes it hard, but you have to get out there and be that face in the crowd, and just got to hustle. Yeah, but that's how you meet people.
To Elizabeth's point, though, with regard to COVID, it's probably worth even talking about that. It is a different world right now, but in some ways it's a level setter in that you don't need to have all the resources to travel to different meetings, because a lot of these meetings, like this one, are online. So it might be actually more efficient and more accessible for people who otherwise couldn't be doing this kind of networking.
I shared my contact in the chat room, by the way. So there you go.
Another area we're hearing more about in terms of having these well thought out is kind of KPIs, and really, as you're going into a round, understanding what your key performance indicators are for your particular business, and showing that you really understand the drivers of your business and the measurements of success, and kind of how you're tracking and adjusting and what's looking good and not good. Maybe we could, I'm kind of hearing more of that coming up in more conversations with investors and companies. Maybe we can just talk a little bit about that, just to kind of give the audience a little bit of background on that. Whoever would like to start.
Well, I mean, I guess I just, since this time around as a serial entrepreneur, I'm doing this biotech. The metrics are pretty well laid out. Unlike other ventures that I've been involved with, where you're sort of trailblazing new areas, and you have to explain what those key metrics are. In this in the pharmaceutical industry, there's a regulatory roadmap that sets those things out. Things like the FDA approval of the clinical trials, and then clinical trial data, and some preclinical things. So I mean, there is very defined things. Actually, kind of makes it easier in the biotech world to be able to explain where you are in the development process of the company.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Okay, I was just going to say, a lot of times you can get your key KPIs, at least as they relate to sort of what the funders want to see, by actually just talking to them and asking them. If you have a handful of conversations and they all start to line up, that's a good indication that you're on the right track in terms of the KPIs they would be looking for. And a lot of people don't ask that question like, well, what would you, when you get a no, like, what would you like me to achieve to be able to fund me? And then again, you have those milestones. And then what we do is we actually have a platform that tracks the milestones and alerts companies to how they're doing against those milestones, so that the accountability is already set in for both them and the investors know that they're being self-accountable.
I was just gonna add that, not to sound like a broken record, but I think that part of the job of the founders is to become the expert in your sector in many ways. And that doesn't mean you're going to be, I'm in my late 20s, so I'm clearly not the world's veteran in logistics, right? But I can try to become the expert in logistics, tech, and venture capital, and the different business models and what are investors' concerns. And I think you gain a lot by becoming the kind of person that builds relationships with investors in a casual way. So, at the end of every catch-up call with an investor, I'll still say, what are you looking to fund? I'll try to connect you with founders. But so I'm trying to add value to them, but the call, I'll ask questions like the ones Mark mentioned, which is, what do you think matters for our business model? Is it like that $1 million mark? And actually, we've heard from many investors recently, we care. I mean, we're past $1 million in top line, but then maybe they want to get to $1 million in net revenue. And we're hearing from a lot of people, actually, Deepak, we don't think that's what matters in your business. We care more about operating leverage, and we care more about retention and cohorts. And we care that you have like some really great case studies and this amount of customers to see that you've actually validated the need with this many people, right? And so I feel like the job of the founder CEO, and I've heard this from, I think, some prominent people who I admire, is that you should almost try to become the expert in the specific thing you're doing by meeting people, having coffee with people that have built similar businesses, to understand what does a healthy business look like, what are the drivers, and then what is the story that resonates with the investors, and then the KPIs you show them should be around that, right? Like in our business, we're a tech-enabled broker. So there's many of these brokers doing what we do, but investors want to see that we've generated operating leverage through software. So then the KPIs I show them are about operating leverage through software, right? It's like, it's all intertwined, because the investors need to sit with their, all their friends and their partners and say, I believe in this, and these are the KPIs that allow me to believe in this, which would let me fund the company, right?
Thank you, Deepak. I'd like to turn it around a little bit just for the next part of our discussion, and that is looking assuming you have some choices, looking at it from the perspective of what should you be looking for in your Series A investor? What is the role a Series A investor plays? And, you know, how should you do due diligence? How do you even go about doing due diligence as an entrepreneur on the investor? A lot of times, you know, entrepreneurs expect the process to include tremendous due diligence on them by the investors, but don't think about the long-term partnership relationship between them and their investor and how important it is. So I'd just like to hear kind of all of your thoughts on that whole side of flipping it around now from the entrepreneur's perspective, looking at the investor, your experiences, your guidance, your thoughts to an entrepreneur from that perspective.
Mark helped me with this in our last round. I don't know if you remember Mark, but I was calling him up when we were negotiating. But yeah, I feel like I already spoke too much. But what I was going to say, Anthony, is that I feel like the other reason I'm a big advocate of this idea of like befriending other founders that have gotten funded is before you even start the process, if you get to the point where you've befriended founders and you're trading learnings about how you hired this person and that person and whatnot, when you get to the fundraising piece, you're already going to know who's having like the annoying board member that is asking for crazy things and the one that's like investing in your competitors and the one that asks you for like a 3x liquidation preference and a deed to your life if the company fails, right? And so I find that at least if you're in the right circles, investors, the good investors will really know that their reputation is their biggest currency and they're very careful in how they behave. And if you're associating with more entrepreneurs who've gotten funded by them, you'll kind of already know who are the good investors, at least by firm reputation, and then the individual, it's more of a courtship, getting to know them. And then towards the end, when we got, you know, the 4 term sheets or whatever in March or April, March, I think, we actually asked in an effort to get other term sheets in and prolong the process and due diligence, we would ask the investors, you've done all your homework on me. I want to speak with 2 or 3 founders you've funded that failed. Like I literally asked them that, all of them. I want to speak with people who you gave money and then things didn't work out. And they'll give you, all investors have like 2 or 3 people that went through that and will say the things, you know, say great things about the investor. And then I'll still try to do some due diligence on the back end, right? But that's because, yeah, the moment they fund you, you're kind of married to them. And if they have like a short fused personality or super strongly opinionated or whatever, that can be problematic. And so I'm very biased towards investors that care a lot about reputation and deal flow, because that leads them to behave really well in all kinds of situations, in my opinion, right?
So I agree with everything that Deepak said. The other aspect of what to look for in the Series A investor, like in the very short time frame, you're looking for an investor that can lead. And leading means doing due diligence. And while it might be counterintuitive, you might think you just want them to give you the money, just skip the due diligence. You're actually looking for an investor that does such painful due diligence that all the other investors say, wow, if that company survived their due diligence, they must be good. And you're not looking just to fill out your Series A. You need to be thinking about the next round. And so a good Series A investor will enable follow-on investors. And that's true for Series A and Series B to crossover rounds and IPO. The IPOs won't happen in many cases unless you have a really well, a VC or an investor that everyone else respects and that they're willing to ride on their coattails of their due diligence. So while the due diligence process can be painful, that's surviving that process really is an enabling thing for the next rounds.
Yeah, I would also add, so, a lot of the venture capital institutions have some institutional bias. They have a length of fund, and then they're moving on to, the next fund. And so you want to take a look and make sure you understand, where they are in their current fund. And, sort of earlier in the fund tends to be a little better than later in the fund in terms of, more patience with, sort of waiting for exits. And then, they're human beings, just like anything else. So, the chemistry between you and the individuals is important. You're going to be living with this person. You can't fire them like an employee. And so, sort of paying attention to those positive feelings that draw you to those individuals versus yellow flags that maybe feel like there's not something in common. Just pay attention to those. And then the last thing I would say is we talked about it earlier, but networking to that particular individual that is your point person or champion, and you're getting to know the people that know that person.
One of the things, just to come back to a point Deepak raised as well, which is this question of asking to speak to CEOs when things didn't go as well, is, I think, really interesting point, just because it's not always just a straight hockey stick up. And sometimes it's more of a roller coaster with some downs and some ups. And so understanding how, when the times get tough, your investors can kind of be a positive force to help you through it, especially since many of them have seen many ups and downs and kind of have the experience of how to manage through those times. Maybe, Elizabeth, just from an investor's perspective, it would be interesting just talk about how having the right investor can really help you manage through those crises.
Yeah, I heard somebody saying, you just want to get the money, but try to go for a strategic also. Someone who can serve as an advisor and do more than just give you the money. So if you do that, they will be able to help you stand upright when you go sideways. And, that doesn't cost them. And in fact, it behooves them to help you, right? Because they've invested in you. And for instance, just as a case example, our group, about half of us are in the healthcare sector or are exited entrepreneurs. We not only invest, we advise and can serve on the advisory board. So we're ready to roll up our sleeves and help as well. So look for smart money. That's the words.
So we are down to our last couple of minutes. And so I thought maybe what we can do is just kind of make our way around our four great guests today, just to see if they're, just for them to share some final thoughts. We've covered a lot of different topics, but any final thoughts you have on the whole Series A and beyond, ideas that we spoke about today that you'd like to leave our audience with today. And maybe we'll start with Greg and then kind of work our way to Mark and Elizabeth and have Deepak close it out for us.
I guess I would just say, in sort of amplifying on the last point that I was made with regard to when you're thinking about any of these series of investments, from your seed investment to Series A, is to keep in mind that you're really building this layer cake and be thinking about the next round. So I know you're going to be focused on raising Series A, but be thinking about how you're structuring that round is going to affect your next steps. So it's being a little bit more of a chess player and thinking strategically.
Great, thanks. Mark?
So after having watched, maybe a couple hundred early stage companies go for Series A funding over the last three years or so, the ones that have had the most success, I found, have a certain level of operational efficiency in everything they do. So that includes, like we talked about, going and doing your homework on which VCs make sense and why and how you go after them. It's also efficiency in terms of identifying what are the key milestones and tracking those milestones and having financial clarity and sort of the accounting piece lined up as well as the legal piece. And even on the go-to-market side, being very efficient in testing and how you get to market. that kind of common thread of efficiency are the ones that are going $20 million valuations and beyond from our group of clients.
Great, thanks. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think this notion of homework and discipline, I can't emphasize it enough. I mean, I so appreciate groups who are well disciplined, because if they're disciplined this way, they're likely disciplined elsewhere. And it's a fantastic reflection on the team. And those are the people that I just can work with well and I appreciate. So try to be ready, do your homework, know your VC, and you know, a teacher also always loves a student who's done their homework. It's no different. Do not slack.
Great, thank you. And Deepak, to close us out here, any final thought that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I just one thing that I don't know if we touched, since it is addressed to entrepreneurs. I actually think that the stage where you're between seed and Series A is a time to actually think critically if you should be a venture funded company. You've learned a lot about your market, you know how large it could be, you know what faith you have. Really think if this is the right fit for you. And again, the best way to find out is befriend a lot of people that have raised money. You'll learn all the tricks and the tips that you heard today and more. You'll learn that it's a process with 99 no's for every yes, and all these things will come. But I would say more kind of on a philosophical note, and try to make sure it's a good fit for you, and then lean into understanding, what you need to do throughout the whole trajectory. But I think a lot of people don't stop to ask that question. That would be my final thought.
Great, thank you. So thanks again to Mark and Greg and Elizabeth and Deepak for a wonderful, informative panel discussion today. And I'm going to hand it back to Rachel.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Anthony, for moderating a great panel today with Mark, Greg, Deepak, and Elizabeth. We really appreciate your time and your support of the DC startup ecosystem, of sharing your knowledge. One thing I wanted to echo what Deepak just said is really taking the time to meet with a lot of other founders who have raised, get their experience, share their knowledge. And one thing that's great to do that is leveraging the DC Startup Week community on the activity stream, sharing private messages with people, ask people to do a virtual cup of coffee, and once COVID's over, an in-person cup of coffee. So definitely leveraging the community is the way to go. So first, thank you again for everyone being here today. We have, I think, 3 more hours left of DC Startup Week, 2 more hours of different talks and sessions. The next one I'm actually a panelist on optimizing your product for product development sprints. And we're closing today with an open mic on failure stories. So if you're interested in learning about people's failures, how they survived them, how they overcame them, lessons learned, join in at 6 p.m. tonight for an open mic of failure stories, which is going to be a lot of fun. So thank you again for everyone, and I'll see you guys soon.